with that. Tom Hanchett, we are so lucky to have you here with us today. You are Charlotte's historian. And if I mentioned all of the accolades, awards, publications that Tom has done, he wouldn't have time left to speak. So we're going to let that settle for another day. And then, but I would like to tell you, his educational background is very impressive. Cornell undergrad, go Big Red, and University of Chicago for his master's, and then on to UNC Chapel Hill for his PhD in US history. I'd like to give you a quote that Tom had about his work life. I've been a community historian all of my adult life. As I explore the communities around me, I've been fortunate to find many different types of employment as well as freelance work. In 2016, I retired from my longest held position, staff historian with the Levine Museum of the New South. And so, Tom, once again, we are so pleased to have you here today. And with that, it's all yours.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
All righty.
Hello, Owl. It's an owl. It's a pleasure to be here. It is a bunch of history makers. When you talk about history, First Presbyterian Church has often been at the forefront. So it is a delight to be here. I like people asking questions, making comments, disagreeing, whatever. I have basically heard this presentation before. You talk better. I'm a little bit deaf. So if you ask a question and I answer a different question, if you could all laugh, that would be. I brought some books. People say you're a historian of Charlotte. Really? Charlotte doesn't have any history. Well, yes, it does. And I will just bring a couple of books by Pamela Grundy looking at education history, African-American history. I'll pass these around. Most of you will be really excited, but some of you might take a cell phone shot and get them at Park Road Books or whatever. John Cleghorn's book about churches and affordable housing. I'll put that in the stack as well. And a new book, Working and Homeless in America. The HUD definition, Housing and Urban Development definition of homelessness, is people who are literally outdoors in a tent or under a bridge. But there are a lot of folks who are right on the edge of that, who are in a motel this week and who are sitting on somebody's sofa next week. And, and so this is about those people. A very powerful, very well-researched book. And then got a couple books that I wrote about Charlotte, so we'll send those along. And what I'm going to do today is tell you some of the small knowledge I have about affordable housing in Charlotte. This is a topic that is so big that I have not yet found anyone in the scholarly world or anywhere else who really has their arms around all of it. And so what I did with this this book about affordable housing in Charlotte is to use this city, which I know fairly well, as a case study of all that has been done by government, but also outside of government, to help foster affordable housing from public housing in the late 30s, early 40s, all the way up to where we are today. With things like the new development where the Behringer Hotel used to be on North Tryon Street. And I only have that one book today. I have some postcards if one wants to get those, go down to Park Road Books or whatever. Also, I will be back next Sunday to talk to Plowshares. And so by that point, I should have more books. So I brought along slides. I'm ready to talk about a bunch of stuff that's up on the screen. But how about we start off with questions? I used to do the questions at the end, but everybody was asleep. So things you want to know about affordable housing. Things that I should know about affordable housing. Yes.
How can we, as individuals of this congregation, participate in relief for the problem?
Cool. I have some slides at the very end. We'll talk about that. One is to be aware, which you guys are dialed in on more than most folks. Another is to go to the ballot box. Every 2 years, we ask our government asks whether we would like to issue bonds, housing bonds, affordable housing bonds. And the most recent issue was $100 million, which sounds like a lot of money, but it is a tiny amount compared to the need. But continuing to do that is very important. And at the very end, I will talk about some ways we could change our laws, our regulations, as people are developing new things or redeveloping housing in Charlotte. And so that's where I'm going at the end. So that's a beautiful question. Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, in the back.
Better or worse than it was 5 years ago? Better or worse than it was 10 years ago?
Henry Cisneros, who was housing secretary under, I think, Clinton, was interviewed for a lengthy New York Times article, magazine article, about 15 years ago that featured Charlotte. And in it was the quote that sums up the answer to that for me. He said, "We're in a rowboat. We're out in the middle of the pond. Water's coming into the rowboat. We're bailing out of the rowboat while somebody on the shore is shooting a fire hose at us and filling the rowboat faster than we can bail." And so we are doing a fair amount of stuff, but the change that's going on is rising real estate prices. This is particularly acute in Charlotte because we got a lot of people coming here. Bless them, love to have them, good neighbors mostly. The pressure on real estate is sending prices up and up. And it turns out it's not just Charlotte. Every American city, the real estate prices are going up, including, I lived in Youngstown, Ohio for 3 years, which is actually losing population. And there too, the real estate prices are going up. Most housing, most affordable housing is not subsidized housing. It is what's called NOAH, naturally occurring affordable housing. And that's what we're losing. That's what I'll talk about. Yes.
Well, I was gonna ask about, the people with very low income, less than 30% of median. And, how, the federal, national attention to getting housing to that population just has, well, not collapsed, but almost collapsed in 1980 when they went from Section 8 to tax credits. And so talk a little bit about that population.
Cool.
Population to what.
Yeah, and that'll be wound through the slides here. So I'll just say a few things here and then I'll probably dip into the slides. The folks at the bottom of the economic ladder, 30% of area median income, and I'll talk about that for a minute if that's new to you. Hard to house. And one notion that you may share, I certainly had it, was, well, that's public housing. And I was amazed to find out that in 1998, a senator from North Carolina, Locke Faircloth, a few of you may remember him, convinced Congress to put in place a cap on the amount of public housing as of 1998. And so we have not been able to add to our supply of public housing for the folks at the bottom of the economic ladder in 30 years. And in terms of NOAH, naturally occurring affordable housing, part of the way you pay for that is working a minimum wage job or a little bit better than minimum wage. Folks know what's been going on with minimum wage? It has not been going up. Hasn't gone up in about 15 years. And so the need is more acute than it was. We have more Americans than we used to, which means that the need is growing in that way. And the ability to meet it in the way that I imagine public housing has not increased. And so that's kind of a context for what I'll talk about here. All right, keep asking questions. And yes.
Yeah, well, you just talking about that available city. I fall in that. I mean, I be going to places where just building apartments.
Yes.
And they have nothing in there.
Yes.
For.
Yes.
Now, why is the city itself keep keep building these apartments all over South. You can't go nowhere in South where you can't find one get built.
Amen.
Or they put it on any kind of land they can.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Small, big, or large, you know, and you still cannot find anything affordable.
Yeah.
And
They-
what's
they-
going on with that?
The apartment construction is actually running ahead of the need just slightly in terms of raw numbers of people coming in. I've had people assume that there is a law that says when you develop new apartments, you have to make a certain percentage of them affordable. There isn't. There could be. And so that's kind of where I want to go. Let me dive into these slides. And keep asking questions, keep making comments. Yeah,
You mentioned Locke Faircloth, it was interesting. You know, what his quote was, because he owned so much land down east, it was said of him by his neighbors, he didn't want it all land, just land it abut his.
yeah, I do not know about Locke Faircloth as a person, can I repeat it loudly, or can you repeat
Yeah,
it loudly?
you can find it, yeah.
He was like Cameron Morrison, who loved buying land. And he owned a lot down east. This is great. I get to practice this with the author of it, or at least the contributor of it. That he didn't want to own all the land down east. He just wanted to own the land that was abutting his. Good. All right. Cool. All right. What's affordable? 30% of your income. That's part of the answer. This is a rule of thumb, and it's been worked out over many years. And when they first proposed some percentage, the percentage was 25%, and that clearly wasn't enough. Experience showed. And so your housing cost, that is your rent, your house payment, if you have a house payment, your utilities, all of that should be no more than 30% of your gross income. So this is your income before taxes and all that. And okay, that's part of the answer. The other part of the answer is affordable for whom? And that wraps you up in this thing called area median income. Folks heard of area median income? Many. How many folks haven't heard of area median income? Bunch of you. All right, good. I'm saying something that's useful, I think. This is great. Median income is folks who are exactly in the middle of the continuum from not well-to-do to very well-to-do. Half of those people are less than area median income, half or more. And so there you go. The area median income is, what was I going? Okay. So public housing and affordable housing in general, generally for folks who are making less than the area median income. That makes sense. And there are two particular price points that I talk about a lot in the book. One is folks making 30% of area median income, which is what we were talking about a minute ago. And those are what we now call essential workers. They're people we deal with every day. We benefit from their work in our lives, custodial workers, food service workers, childcare workers, and then also disabled people, seniors relying on Social Security. All of those folks are at 30% AMI. Most recently, we are becoming very aware, this has been true for a long time, but it's kind of rubbing our face in it. Reality is 60% of area median income. It's tough for those folks to find housing. Who are they? Teachers, nurses, first responders, social workers. I was giving this talk at another church, but the minister was there. He said, junior clergy. Junior clergy are at that 60% of area median income. And so a lot of people. And let me put some statistics in that. This will surprise you. For a family of 4 in 2005, the area median income in Charlotte is right about $100,000. I'm rounding just slightly because it helps me do the math. So 60% of area median income means you're making $60,000 a year. You can afford about $1,500 a month in rent. Anybody looked for an apartment recently in Charlotte? Very hard to find anything at $1,500 a month rent. Imagine being 30% of AMI. Making $30,000, probably working 2 or 3 jobs to make that $30,000. $750 a month rent, which basically doesn't exist. And so that's the problem. And it is not just anecdotal. The Charlotte Observer in 2022, Charlotte Mecklenburg rent 1% of apartments way back then, or under $1,000. And I just had a wonderful session. I sat in at Covenant Presbyterian Church with Laura Belcher. Some of you know her as the Habitat person. And she had a statistic that amplified this. She said in I think the last 4 years, something like that, that the area median income in Charlotte has gone up 68%, which is $100,000. Boy, that sounds like a lot of money. Well, it's not. She said our cost at Habitat to build a house has gone up 250%. And so that's kind of part of this fire hose in the boat thing, is that salaries are going up, wages are going up, but not nearly enough. So questions, comments about the what's affordable part of the conversation?
Just to clarify,
Yeah.
you say rent, but you meant total housing cost.
Yes, total
Okay.
housing cost. Yeah, and the thing over here on the right, is the rent is over $1,000, and then you add your utilities to it, of course, so. Yeah,
You might want to add about the fact that, it suggests when eligibility is determined, it's adjusted for family size.
right, and that's why I've got the family of 4 up there.
Okay, so.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Cool. So, how has it been provided? How have we provided affordable housing? And I'll start off with NOAA, naturally occurring affordable housing. Talk about early public housing, which a lot of us, I'm talking about me, still have in our heads as that's it, but actually it's changed a lot from early public housing. Going to talk about subsidies to for-profit investors. Much of our affordable housing is subsidized not to the occupant, but to an investor or an owner. And that's fascinating. Also talk about where you build affordable housing. Initially, public housing was set apart at the edge of town. Now mixed income is the thing. So let me start out with Noah, not the guy with the big boat. But keeping your head above water. There's some kind of joke in there which I can't figure out, but there you go. NOAA has always been the biggest source of affordable housing until the federal government got involved in the 30s. It was the only source. And it is amazing to walk around. You can't do this driving because they're kind of hidden, but Myers Park has rental housing that was built originally there. There are duplexes, there are small apartment developments in Myers Park from the 19-teens, 1920s. And I say that because I live in the wannabe Myers Park. Plaza Midwood wanted to be Myers Park, but then Myers Park became Myers Park. My neighborhood also has rental housing mixed in. This is normal. This is natural. This is the way the market used to work. Can you see the fourplex? Can you see the duplex way over on the left? Hard to tell it's a duplex, but it is. The 2 single-family houses, I'm sure, were single-family original. By the time I moved there in the 90s, they were rental houses. Now, all of those are owner-occupied. And so the ability of low-income or moderate-income people to rent in my neighborhood has pretty much evaporated. See a hand over there.
My husband, when he moved here in 1982, as a young banker, bought a condominium in a building that looks just like that one on the right.
There you go.
In Myers Park. And so they converted, they were converting them. That was the early beginning of the full condominium conversion. So a lot of them got converted. I know some of them still exist as rental, but I thought that was interesting because I had never seen anything like that. It was a beautiful old 1900s building.
So the notion that we could have rental housing in every neighborhood is not a weird liberal thing. It is in some ways deeply conservative in that we did that for a long time. And so that's a thing to think about as we get to the end here and talk about what can we do. Yeah.
I talk about Noah, it would be 4 years before that when the mills came in, they actually built a lot of housing. Can you speak to that?
And I missed some words, say again?
Mills.
Oh, mill housing.
In the
I love it when somebody asks a question that I'm actually prepared to answer. So what we're looking at in the other place is middle class, maybe lower middle class folks, newlyweds, people who worked in a store that somebody around the corner might have owned the store. But at the bottom of the economic ladder, the hardworking folks in the textile mills, the hardworking folks who did the work of household care and all of that, were set apart in their own areas. Now, the areas were not far away. If you look at East Boulevard in Dilworth, about 2 blocks away is the Atherton Mill Village. And only a couple of the buildings are still there, but this is white working class housing for textile mill workers. Brooklyn in the upper right, housing for African-American blue collar workers. And these were not nearly as nice as what you see in the Thomas Street in Plaza Midwood. One of the things that was not the case in that kind of housing was that there were not indoor plumbing, there were not indoor bathrooms until the late 40s. And I talk in the book about how that came to be. But the segregation of them and the owners meant that the owners felt they were insulated from living in a neighborhood with no indoor plumbing. That started to change in the 40s because of the polio epidemic. And folks finally realized that polio was spread by flies, mosquitoes, lighting on human waste, and then coming and buzzing around your dining table. And so that is when the real estate leaders have started to demand building codes that created indoor plumbing. So what we're talking about is different levels of NOAA. This was, there were some wonderful communities in these neighborhoods on the right, but in terms of housing, not so good. So that gets us up to the 1930s, when the New Deal is offering some federal money to fulfill ideas that visionaries had held for a while. And a lot of those visionaries were women, club women. At that point, there were no women in elected office. There were virtually no women in the city bureaucracy or county bureaucracy or state bureaucracy. And what these women, a woman's place is in the home. All right, we'll make that our issue and we'll work publicly to get Charlotte to participate in this New Deal. The New Deal, part of the idea was to put people to work. Well, what if they built public housing? What a great idea. These people have been talking about it. These women have been talking about it. And now they started to actually build. Charlotte built 2 public housing projects in the New Deal in the 1930s. Fairview Homes, Piedmont Courts. One was black, one was white. How many folks remember Fairview Homes? Number of you. Thank you so much. Yeah. Set apart. Fairview Homes in particular was way out Statesville Avenue. About the only thing you could walk to was the Model T Ford plant. Other than that, walking to church, walking to the grocery store, walking to your job, very difficult. Public housing was better than what you'd seen before because it had indoor plumbing, it had window screens, it had roofs that actually worked, and people were glad to move into Fairview Homes, Piedmont Courts, but it was not the total solution. Surprising fact, and I mentioned this earlier, we have not built additional public housing since the Faircloth Amendment, Faircloth 1998, yes.
Who owns that dirt?
Who owns the public housing?
Yeah, who owns the dirt?
The public housing was us, is the short answer. The public housing was a federal grant to the local public housing authority. And so every city set up a public housing authority. Here it's in Livian. That's the new name of the Charlotte Housing Authority. And they still have ownership in those areas, even though both of those developments have been redeveloped.
So they own, so the Charlotte, but just call it Charlotte. Charlotte owns how much dirt for public housing? This is a lot. This is.
The, let me answer a question I can answer. I don't have a specific figure in my head. I know where to get it. If you get it in a compilation of a list that I created of all of the affordable housing developments that have ever been done in Charlotte. And there are 180 of them that have been done. 150 of them are still around. About half of those roughly are owned by Livian. So there's kind of that. But if you look at the book, you can find a link to that data site. Cool. All right, let me keep going. So public housing gets started in the 30s. And golly, I thought that's all there was. In fact, I helped co-write a book about the history of public housing in the United States many years ago. And I didn't know about investor-built low-income housing. Now, this is today, if you know about the low-income housing tax credit and all of that, much of our housing is investor-built. And it seems like a new idea, but it's not. It's been going at least since 1947. When veterans were coming back from World War II, not much had been built during the Depression. And so the federal government said, we got to put together some kind of subsidy program that will get a lot of housing built quick. And it's a thing called FHA 608. I don't think any of these people ever hired a marketer because all of these numbers and names, I can't keep them straight, but unfortunately I have notes on the screen. So what they did is they gave a 90% loan to any developer who wanted to build apartments for anybody. That is pretty amazing. And it wasn't just a 90% loan because you could, with the acquiescence of the FHA, you could mortgage out. You could adjust your land costs and stuff like that. You could get 100% loan, which meant that you could build housing without having any of your own money in it. And boy, people jumped on that. Dozens and dozens and dozens of housing developments all over the United States. If you are a Chapel Hill person, my mom spent some of her last years at Glen Lennox. It's an FHA 608. Some of you may know Selwyn Village. The Fertile Valley, as they called it. This was a lot of young newlyweds about had babies. And it's owned by Park Road Shopping Center. Among the folks at Selwyn Village were a young married couple, and he worked at the bank called Hugh Call. And his friend, they play touch football all the time, was Ed Crutchfield of First Union. C.B. Spangler lived there. In fact, the Spangler family managed that. And so the original one was Scotland Colony in Myers Park. And this is subsidized housing for well-to-do folk. Not super well-to-do folk, but Hugh McCall has done all right as you look at his earning curve. And C.B. Spangler, who really got into this, the Marsh family did, the Crosland family did, realized that because the feds basically guaranteed a return, that you could go ahead and do low-income housing. And Spangler is to be commended for that. Among the places that he did, the white development that's still there, I live real near it, Plaza Terrace. Some of you may remember Tryon Hills, Double Oaks, South Statesville Avenue, Brook Hill Village, parts of which are still there. And wow. And it was such a lucrative thing that eventually folks in Washington kind of rebelled and said, we've got to end this huge subsidy program. And so about 5 years it shut down. But most of the early apartment developments that we know in our lives come out of FHA 608. And about a third of them were low income. They called them low rent apartments. So investors involved in building low rent housing. That goes out of business in the early fifties. Comes back in the 1960s. When there is an interaction between a new tax break called accelerated depreciation. This is where everybody goes to sleep. So if you're feeling sleepy. Accelerated depreciation said that you build a building and you can claim a loss because it gets less valuable every year, doesn't it now? But you could do that and you could shelter your other taxes with that. And so the notion that you get a tax break for building housing, if you could get a tax break for building any kind of housing. Or shopping centers or office parks, which we get a gracious plenty of. But combined with that was a program of low interest loans, particularly for building low cost housing. And this is Sylvia Porter. So we lived by the Sylvia Porter money book in my household. Tremendously influential woman. Big profits possible in low income housing. And a lot of that is built around Charlotte. And it was not really popular except with the developers because the way they structured it was that the developer could build something and then the local housing authority had to buy it from them. Which meant the person who built the housing never had to deal with upkeep, never had to deal with, and that does sound weird. And also there were no public hearings about where to put the stuff because it was being done by a private entity. And so West Boulevard got about half a dozen of these in a 5-year window, 1968, 1972. And that's when West Boulevard became known as a low income area. Before that, it hadn't been. So things like Boulevard Homes, Little Rock Homes, Dalton Village. Wow. And still today, even though West Boulevard is much more diverse than you might imagine, this notion that it is a concentration of very poor people. Most of these have been redeveloped, but that notion is still. Questions, comments so far? Yeah.
You say redevelop, tell me what that means.
I wasn't listening to myself, so I have to really take it back and see what we're doing. I'm using we as the system. And the system includes developers, it includes government folks, it includes people at the grassroots. And so I'm using we as America through these many inputs did this kind of development.
I'm sorry, what does redevelopment?
Redevelopment. Don't get deaf and old. Don't do that. I've heard these. We developed and you said redevelop. Let me see if I can, what's comes next. Hang on one second. Okay. Hang on to the redeveloped question, because I'm gonna hit it here. It's something called Hope 6. Anybody heard of Hope 6? Few of you have, okay. You are the nerds, you are my people. Thank you. This is great. So, do we really want this housing to be so isolated? Is that good for anybody? And there's a sea change in American history about this notion where the city should be sorted out to different counties for everyone and everyone in their place. And we began partly as a result of the civil rights movement to say, well, what if we mix things up more? And it turns out if you mix things up more, you get a healthier city. And Charlotte was at the forefront of that. Partly because we had a new city government in the late 70s. We had switched from entirely at-large elections to district elections. Elected Betty Chafin Rash, who was one of the first, I think was the first woman to be mayor pro tem, elected Harvey Gantt. People like Ron Leeper and Don Carroll, and people who, in my era of Charlotte, were very memorable. And what they shifted to in the late 70s, early 80s was scattered site housing. And this came out of a lawsuit in Chicago. And Chicago didn't build very much of this, but a number of other cities did, including us. The idea was build smaller projects, make them look just like every other apartment complex you drive by, and scatter them everywhere. And what you're looking at on the left is on Providence Road. Blakedale on Providence Road. This is where Old Providence splits off. And still today, most of the folks around there have no idea that there is literally public housing. This is owned by Enlivian. And it is Charlotte Housing Authority. And it's part of this massive build. Massive, I'm going to roll that back in a minute. But take a look here at those squares, and a lot of them are in Southeast Charlotte, as well as every place else on the map. Wow. And it's massive in one way, there are a lot of projects. But when it comes to addressing the whole problem, 50 units at a time, which is really good for mixing in, isn't really good for solving the problem. And so I think if we had kept on doing this at a high rate, we might have actually solved the problem. But instead of that, there was another carrot that I'll talk about in a moment. Questions about scattered site housing? Anybody? Yeah, questions or comments?
Did
Memories?
any other areas in the country do this successfully?
Every area of the country did a little bit. In Chicago, it was very, very grudging. And here, because we had a lot of people who were inspired by the busing case here, were inspired by Harvey Gann's election as mayor, there was a lot of momentum to building a better South. And part of it was self-preservation. If we looked like Birmingham, where they brought out police dogs and firehouses when change was about to happen, that was bad for business. And so this is not something that only we did. But I'm patting us on the back a little bit because we're pretty serious about it. Yes.
As I recall, this program was supported by almost all people unless the specific site was next to you or close to you.
And that's called NIMBY. Folks heard of NIMBY?
Yeah.
Not in my backyard. And that's what ended up making this less successful than you might imagine. Harvey Gann, I quote him in the book, used to love, still does, I think, put people in the minivan driving around Charlotte, where he'd been mayor, and they would go past scattered site housing. And at the end, he'd say, what'd you think of what we saw? And maybe people doing it. And he said, you were in the middle of public housing. And so, we could build more stuff. Did I see a hand in the back? All right. So scattered site. What if we went full on from this set apart public housing that's Fairview Homes to a true mixed income neighborhood? And this is the redevelopment I was talking about. This is a program called Hope 6, came on in the late 90s, and it was one of the first ones in the United States, was First Ward. And then followed by what's now Arbor Glen, what's now Renaissance West, what's now Siegel Point. They tore down the old development, moved everybody out, paid their rent, and Enlivian and Dream Key Partners and the banks all collaborated on building a new neighborhood with senior housing, mixed income apartments. You can see some single family houses, folks who used to live in public housing. This is there. Still there, beautiful shape, 20 years old now. And this is the Park at Oaklawn development right near Camp. Does that do a good job with the redevelopment? And so basically, we redeveloped through Hope 6 all of our big public housing projects except one, Southside Homes is the only one that's still from the 40s, 50s. Developments. Yes.
All of those been successful, stayed filled and.
Yes, absolutely. And you drive by them on a regular basis. As you leave here, drive down 7th Street East. And you are in the middle of what used to be the Earl Village public housing. And it is now mixed income housing. It's been mixed income housing for close to 30 years. And it's just as desirable as ever. It's got market rate folks, Section 8 folks. All mingled, can't tell. Yes.
Are you gonna speak to the Section 8 program?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
About how successful it is.
Yes. So where are we today? Some good news is that we've done a lot of this mixed income development. And you probably live near it, drive near it. Anybody know South Park Mall?
I've heard of it.
This is a low-income housing development. This is right behind the Whole Foods Market. Nordstrom's is over here where my hand is. This is Ashley Park Lane, which is new. This is a collaboration between Inlivium, the Charlotte Housing Authority, and Peter Pappas, a major developer who many of you will probably know personally. There had been a small scattered site development there, wiped it out, built this with that courtyard apartment there. There are 30 low-income units, among others. Other kinds of units. Oh, look at that. Okay. Wow. Cool. So 30 low-income units mingled amongst market rate units, and then an entirely low-income senior apartment. So about 80 low-income units right next to them. Are the property values okay in South Park? So we hear this is going to destroy property values, but in reality, yeah.
I know most of the time, when we talk about that, most of the time back in Boston, but they'll do the construction cycle, you're probably gonna get got by those things like code violations, so on.
Ah, okay, okay.
Yeah.
And talk to me more about that later, because that's something I know much about. So here's one. Here's another. This is Bright Walk. You gotta go to Bright Walk. Bright Walk out Statesville Avenue, 1 mile from downtown. It had been the Double Oaks, investor owned and not well maintained. Most of the units were uninhabitable in 2005. Bank foreclosed on it. Dream Key Partners, nonprofit here in Charlotte, wiped it out, moved everybody out, paid their rent until they built the new development here. And you're looking at single family homes, you're looking at townhouses, you're looking at low-income apartments, all in the same development. And the low-income apartments will remain low income. These were sold, and therefore they are appreciating like crazy, like in any other neighborhood. And it is a beautiful neighborhood. If you've not been to Bright Walk, think about that. Pat Garrett Way. Pat Garrett was the woman who was one of the leaders putting this together, national important person in terms of doing affordable housing. Questions, comments about what we've seen so far?
Does this accommodate enough people to be a workable long-term solution? I mean, it sounds wonderful. Everything you
Does
do.
this accommodate enough people to be a workable long-term solution? No. Should we quit doing it? We should not quit doing it. What we're going to need are a whole bunch of different solutions. And this is a solution, doesn't solve the whole problem, but it creates a better situation for a chunk of us. And so we got to keep, I'm preaching, pardon me, but we got to keep doing this kind of thing, but then we got to do more. And that's my message. And I'll tell you why in a minute. Yeah.
These very successful projects, there have been a few of them. Are grocery stores and other necessity type people good about relocating within those communities or close by?
And again, that's a problem. Here, you'll see Whole Foods Market. Dang, it works. And you may be saying, well, poor people can't go to Whole Foods. Yes, they can, because they're not paying for a car, they're not paying for a bus ride. And they can, not only that, they can work at Whole Foods Market without paying for a car and paying for a bus ride. And so, yeah, we could do that. Here, it has been almost impossible, in fact, at the moment, technically impossible, to get a grocery store to invest. And maybe you know somebody in the grocery store business, you could talk to them. Because this is not a income constrained part of town. There's a market here. We should be a grocery store in addition to a market. There's probably a joke there, but I can't figure out how to make it. Wow, we could do this in every part of Charlotte. And unless we do it in every part of Charlotte, we're not going to get the numbers that will really make a dent. And Lisa Dillard is nodding enthusiastically. I hope you say something about that in a minute. The problem is that fire hose, and here's the fire hose that is filling the boat fast as we can do projects to empty it. What we're looking at is house rent in Charlotte since the 2008 recession, and look at that. The city has lost more than half its supply, 28,000 units of large scale NOAA. These are the big apartment complexes that are getting converted they're putting in granite countertops and doubling the rent. And then you get the small time folks who just do one house, but imagine you're a renter in this house. Is your landlord gonna keep renting to you, or are they gonna sell? And so all of our folks in Charlotte, just about, who are living in rental housing, which is about 40% of us. 40% of us are renters. And this is fear. Am I gonna still be able to live in my neighborhood? So let me talk about financing just for a minute, and then we'll wrap things up. There are two main programs today that help provide affordable housing. And one of them is Section 8 housing, also known as housing choice vouchers. And this is where you're making less than the market rent for an apartment, but you pay what is 30% of your income, and the federal government will help your landlord get it up to 100%. This is, again, not a liberal plot. This was created by Ronald Reagan in the 1980s, and it is not perfect, but it is the largest way that we provide subsidized low-income housing. Yeah.
It was created in the 70s. Section 8 housing.
Cool.
Created.
I'd love to talk with you more about that. Section 8 starts earlier, but initially it's Section 8 project-based.
Well, there was Section 8 project-based, Section 8 existing, and Section 8 substantial rehabilitation.
Yes.
All that was going on in the 70s. So it was big.
The voucher thing hits in the 80s and has been largely unchanged since the 80s. So
Voucher replaced Section 8 existing in the lexicon. That's
okay. Wonderful. Let's talk more about that, because you're probably I know a bunch, but I don't have my arms around the whole thing. Housing choice vouchers, big deal. In terms of building new housing, this is done through these tax breaks for developers. It's called an investment tax credit, low-income housing tax credit, that allows you to shelter other income. And so that's the second biggest way of providing low-income housing. So that's where we are. Section 8 person, am I doing well in what you wanted to say there?
Very well. The previous chart where all of a sudden rents spiked, can you talk about that? Why is it going so crazy for these last few years? It always was going up.
Right. Let's talk about that later. I'll tell you one thing though. What happens right here, starting in 2008, the Federal Reserve cuts interest rates, which stimulates development. Usually, the Federal Reserve will cut interest rates, stimulate development, then bring it right back up. In 2008, they kept cutting the interest rates. And when COVID hit, they really cut the interest rates. Anybody refinance your house in the early 2020s? 3%, 2.5% mortgages. Wow. And I think that's one of the reasons why the curve goes upward. There's also a book called Abundance that talks about regulations that have made it harder to build. And so I think that's part of the story as well. Okay, keep going because we've got about 5 minutes. So you have these two big programs that do much of the work of providing affordable housing. What's going on with those? I don't know, but I can tell you what I've read. It is really hard figuring this stuff out, partly because the government is now shut down, but also because in the wake of the big beautiful bill, a lot of the details have not been worked out. Section 8 housing choice vouchers, the folks who are putting together the big beautiful bill in July were calling to shortly curtail vouchers. And what we do know is that the budget for HUD, housing and urban development, which includes the vouchers, has been cut someplace between 40% and 50%. Whether that will directly cut Section 8 or just make it impossible to get it because the officials don't exist anymore, I don't know. Ironically, low-income housing tax credit as they were working on the bill, they were talking about expanding and strengthening. I think it may have something to do with the fact that Mr. Trump's main job in his life, besides being famous, and I'm not giving him a hard time for that, but is as a real estate developer and has done a lot of low-income housing. And so expand and strengthen low-income housing tax credit. That is what folks have been talking about. And indeed, this part got written directly into the bill. I believe 12.5% increase in the amount of low-income housing tax credit projects that we could do in the United States. So better, probably not better. If I was a magic wand, I would wave the wand. All of those would be great.
But Tom,
Yes,
I think you should add that low income housing tax credit, which is, it's only up to, I mean, it supports 60% people. It doesn't support, it's not, the rents aren't low enough to support anybody but 60% people.
right. Yeah, it's called a low-income housing tax credit, but it's actually for people at 60% AMI. North Carolina's Housing Finance Agency, in order to get, they're the ones who are the spigot that turn on the credits from Washington. In order to get them to pay attention to your project, you should put some 60% AMI in it. But nonetheless, if I was waving a wand, I would make it much more lucrative for developers to serve people at 30% AMI. I'm not in charge of that. There you go. What can we do? Well, there's a bunch of possibilities, but let me come back to this thing. We've got about 3 minutes here. What if we require developers to include affordable units in every development? Say you're building new 10 units, one of them should be at 30% AMI, one of them 60% AMI. And this is not weird. This is called inclusionary zoning. And it is so not weird that 900 municipalities in 25 states do this. We don't. We are a Dillon rule state. You all heard that? Don't worry about it if you haven't. Basically, the the legislature in Raleigh has to explicitly give permission for anything a locality wants to do. And I've been told that inclusionary zoning is illegal in North Carolina. It is not. It just hasn't been enabled. Does that make a difference? Well, I think it does. I think it gives us a little wedge if we want to pursue this. Davidson has inclusionary zoning. It's not been enabled. It's in their write-up. But if they ever have to go to court, Mayor Rusty Knox says, we'll lose. But in the short term, people who are thinking about developing in our neighborhood, in our city, in our community, they'll read that and they'll start to think, maybe we can do this. And indeed, in Davidson, so well-to-do, the newest developments have low-income housing. And so if we wanted to get involved in a lobbying kind of way, an organizing kind of way, organizing towards this would be a powerful thing. Yes.
In 1993, we bought a house in a new development in Davidson, at the time, and we built a separate apartment over our garage. And we had to really fight to do that in order that we'd be able to provide housing for a nanny. That was the purpose, but it was extremely restrictive.
Yeah.
It was 1993. They were like, this is just wrong, this is gonna bring in 4 people.
Yes.
But that was Davidson in 1993.
And now in Charlotte, by right, you can build that kind of houses called an ADU, an accessory dwelling unit. In fact, we built one behind our house for a teacher. And so you can see there's a lot more that we can talk about. We're getting up to tight to the time here. Lisa Diller, do you want to say a word or two about advocacy and the church? And if you don't, that's not a problem. Chris will be back again next week.
No, I'm fine too. A lot of our money from the Easter offering 2 years ago went to make homes more affordable right across the street from Westerly Hills. And then this past year's Easter offering went to help Habitat We're looking for something to advocate for. And we just need to find out really how to go about it. So,
If I could wave that wand again as an advocate, I would ask the folks in Raleigh to give us permission for a referendum. Can we vote on whether we want this or not? And knowing the folks in Raleigh right now, that would take some serious lobbying. But that seems possible. I've been floating that past people who know Raleigh well, and they don't immediately laugh at me.
Just to be clear, referendum on.
This is a thought, that the folks in Raleigh would say, okay, any locality that wants to try this cockamamie inclusionary zoning, you have to have a local election to vote yes or no. If you want to do it to yourselves, go ahead. And I'm speaking in my language, but that would be what the idea would be.
I was gonna say, the developer perspective on inclusionary housing is, why should that cost be foisted on the industry? I mean, there are grocery stores everywhere. They don't have special discounts for poor people.
Right.
You go to car dealerships, you don't get special discounts.
Right.
And, so it cuts into their ability to develop rental housing.
Yeah.
And, we wouldn't have the bonus of or too many apartments that we have now if that was in place and it was required.
Yeah. And this is why, putting together a team to figure out the various perspectives on this would be so powerful. I see we're right at the time here. I will tell you a quick story from history, how we got toilets in everybody's house. In the teens, 20s, the 30s, women are organizing for indoor plumbing and getting nowhere. People say it's socialist. People say government is overreach. They say the poor people don't want that. They wouldn't know what to do with it. You'll increase the amount of housing that we're able to build and all of the things that we hear so often, which have truth to them. And I'm not pushing back on that. But what happened in 1947 with the polio epidemic was the real estate leaders looked around and they said, this is a major threat to Charlotte's economic success. If we are a polio site, it's not good for us individually, but it's also not good for us economically. And they created something called the Realtor Standard House Ordinance. The real estate leaders got out in front of the issue. They said, we need window screens. We need indoor plumbing. Everybody needs to own that. But also, if developers are all required to do that, yeah, it raises the price, but it raises a little bit. And we all have indoor plumbing. If we did that with affordable housing, it would raise the price a little bit. But if every developer had to do it, I think we'd have a better community like we did with affordable housing with indoor plumbing. Let me stop there. This is great. Talk to me more. Come see us next
and
week.
come next Sunday.
And it'll be
After worship.
somewhat similar, but we'll have an even more robust conversation because y'all will be well grounded.
Thank you.
Thank you.